If you go into the Sydney Jewish Museum today, you can see digitised Holocaust survivors speaking. You can even ask some of them questions, and using artificial intelligence, they'll respond. These are some of the great technological advancements that are helping to tell stories and keep memory alive. But as we know, technological advancements don't end there. Today, I'm going to talk to you about some of the destructive elements of technology and how they've contributed to war crimes. And I'm also going to talk to you about some of the constructive ways that technology is contributing to accountability. An example of this is Meta, the parent company of Facebook, which has been accused of amplifying content that is vilifying and discriminatory against Rohingya people in Myanmar. It has been accused of doing this through its content-shaping algorithms in its newsfeed, ranking and recommendations features, and also through things like not investing in content moderation and failing to take down accounts. So for example, an anti-Rohingya monk posted a video that amassed 70% of its views through something called chaining. So chaining is where a video plays straight after the one you've been watching based on recommendations from the algorithm. In the case of the Rwandan War Crimes Tribunal, we saw media executives convicted for their role in inciting hatred through their radio station. Given we've seen how traditional media has played a role in incitement for war crimes, it is not hard to imagine how much more significant the role of social media could be in incitement to commit war crimes. Another area is cybercrime. So for the first time, cybercrime is being considered as a war crime in the context of Ukraine and Russia. Sandworm, which is a notorious hacking group associated with Russia's military intelligence, has been accused of cyber attacks against Ukraine for a number of years now. One of them is a destructive, self-spreading malware that has infected organisations in Ukraine, but also globally, causing an unprecedented billions of dollars of damage. Another more recent one last year was an attack on broadband that affected Ukraine, but also affected Europe, including wind turbines in Germany. While no one is suggesting that these attacks are as heinous or significant as physical war crimes attacks so far, the problem is that these are borderless. We don't know where they have no limit, and also we don't know how grave they can become. What I find most frightening is the idea of lethal autonomous weapons. These are weapons that are initially activated by a person, but once they've been activated, that person has no control over where and when and who that weapon targets. So it is pre-programmed and has sensors to identify specific targets. That could be a tank, or it could be a combatant, a soldier, but whether it actually is identifying that correctly then can't be stopped. So, for example, if the tank is actually a school bus, then that weapon will attack it. Or if the tank is behind a school bus, you rely on it being programmed to be able to identify who is in the vicinity and be able to make assessments of proportionality. It's a terrifying idea, and one that doesn't take much for our imaginations to spin out of control with. It is the reason why so many right now are pushing for regulation and legislation on this, so that before it becomes part of common use by any militaries. Just as we are seeing technology being used to help commit war crimes, we're also seeing it being used to hold perpetrators to account. Technology has an amazing ability to allow us all to bear witness. Most of us have phones in our pockets, and we can use them to document what we see. We saw that recently in some domestic examples in the US. For example, the killing of George Floyd was filmed by an onlooker in horror, but that has been useful as evidence of what happened. Likewise, in the January 6 riots in the US Capitol, perpetrators themselves were filming what was going on, which again gave us insight over what was happening and who was responsible. But it's not just domestic context we're seeing it. People say that there are more hours of footage of the Syrian conflict than there are hours of the conflict itself. In addition to events being filmed by onlookers and those involved, we're also seeing a growing field of open source intelligence. This is where investigators are able to use information that they otherwise might not have had access to. So in the past, we relied on investigators on the ground finding information, but now we can couple that with online information. So for example, being able to trawl social media accounts and YouTube, TikTok, Telegram, where there's a lot of information uploaded. Also being able to just dive deeper into websites that maybe sometimes have information buried or is harder to find, and using things like satellite imagery and analysis. Of course, there are pitfalls with this. We have issues around over-documentation, around bias, around ethics, around consent, around context. You can't see often what's going on around it, authentication and deep fakes. But these are all things that can be addressed and we're continuing to look at. We're seeing domestic courts using digital evidence more and more, and we're going to be seeing it increasingly in other courts in the international arena. The most important thing at this point is to make sure that we are regulating and professionalising this space so that information that is collected is admissible and can be used in courts and can be preserved as evidence for later. So while technology can erode human rights and facilitate the commission of crimes in a way it never could before, it can also be used to strengthen and protect human rights and hold perpetrators to account. The challenge for us as a society is to stay on the front foot, to have foresight and be proactive and make sure that it's developed and regulated in a way that allows us to be the beneficiaries of it and not to be victims of it. If we use it wisely, we can continue to get the positive elements of it, including keeping memory alive and ensuring never again is a reality.